And it was rather extraordinary, again, to hear a government spokesperson yesterday tell us we don't need a national anti-corruption watchdog. It's better if this sort of thing is diffused throughout the public service. And the minister is effectively saying we'd rather nobody was in charge. We'd rather there was nobody where the buck stopped to keep an eye and unearth corruption and to be able to take evidence and to be able to be the person where the buck stops. They'd rather that that was diffused and that it not really be anybody's responsibility. I don't know if it's the first time that that form of argument has been run, but I found it peculiar and entirely unconvincing. An example of where I think we could use this kind of body in the Western Australian context. You will be aware, because Senator Siewert and I have been raising this matter for many years. Senator Lyons has been raising it. Senator Sterle has been raising it. The matter of the Perth Freight Link, the so-called Row 8 extension, back in Western Australia. It was announced very suddenly by the Liberal government right before the 2013 federal election. It's one of these dead dogs of a policy of Tony Abbott, former Prime Minister Tony Abbott, that is still stinking the place up. There's WestConnex, there's the East-West Link, and there's Roe Highway. One of these kind of zombie policies, a tremendously expensive one that refuses to fall over. $1.2 billion of Australian people's taxpayers' money committed on a whim, effectively signed off on the back of an envelope by former Prime Minister Tony Abbott. No business case, no public cost-benefit analysis, and the contract has been awarded, what do you know, by the state government, I should say, not the Commonwealth, to a consortium of companies led by Leighton Holdings, who, I don't know if this was anything to do with brand damage, but they renamed themselves as CIMIC a little while ago. They're a massive donor to the Liberal Party. Leightons have donated nearly $700,000 to the WA Liberal and National parties. That buys a lot of TV time, doesn't it? That buys a lot of access. That buys a lot of quiet conversations. These old networks, private school networks, old boys clubs, greased by $700,000 political donation. All above board. Nothing illegal. $700,000 to the Liberal National parties. So this is a corporation that is bidding for a massive government contract. So for your $700,000, entirely above board, you can go into bid for $1.2 billion engineering and construction contracts. It's a clear conflict of interest. No wonder trust in the institutions and that queasy interface between commerce and politics. No wonder trust is at an all-time low. We think that it's time to ban political donations from for-profit corporations. And I know that's going to cause a degree of hyperventilation from the other end of the chamber, because it's that money that helped put you here, but we think that these things should be banned. Leighton's is a $6.3 billion company, and they run mining, construction, transport and engineering projects all around the globe. And it's been described as a company where corrupt practices were absolutely endemic. Highly paid senior executives used a range of bribery techniques, including kickbacks to subcontractors, special payments to procure contracts and facilitation payments. So while these bribery incidents occurred overseas, Leighton's involvement with Australian government-funded projects has been questioned. Who would you put these kind of questions to? At the moment, there is nobody. There is nobody that you can put these kind of questions to. So Leighton's, as I said, they now operate under the name CIMIC after corruption allegations in 2013 came to light. So that's fine, just change the name. We don't know whether these practices have changed, whether the corporate culture has changed. We don't know whether these kind of activities are occurring under the table here in Australia, because there's nobody tasked to find out. In 2013, the Sydney Morning Herald reported building giant Leighton was rife with corruption, and they disclosed evidence of massive bribery and corruption in the way that contracts were being won around the world. Most notoriously, the multi-million-dollar kickbacks paid to win contracts in Iraq, which were later investigated by the Australian Federal Police. As recently as January 31st of this year, the Herald reported building giant Leighton rife with corruption, and I want to quote from that article. In revelations that will cause international embarrassment for Australia and raise questions about the role of the nation's corporate watchdog, the files expose plans to pay alleged multi-million-dollar kickbacks in Iraq, Indonesia, Malaysia and elsewhere, along with other serious corporate misconduct. Hundreds of confidential company documents obtained during a 6-month Fairfax media investigation also reveal a culture of rewarding corruption or incompetence and abysmal corporate governance in what looms as the worst recent case of corporate corruption involving a major Australian firm. So they can throw down $700,000 here in Australia, and as if by magic, through some black box tendering process that is shrouded in commercial confidence, this Parliament hasn't been able to assess exactly why that contract was won or whether the contract represents value for money. They nailed down a $1.2 billion construction contract for a completely pointless road, freight highway, through an important wetland area, an area of enormous significance to Aboriginal people, an area of very high neighbourhood amenity, an area that has effectively been dubbed the King's Park of the South. For anybody from Western Australia will know that this is an area of extraordinary biodiversity, of extraordinary value to the community, and it's being torn in half effectively by this project.